Okay, so hello, we're going to draw with ballpoint pens today. It's my favorite way of drawing because I just find it really relaxing. We probably won't finish. We might, but we probably won't. It usually takes me longer to do a ballpoint pen. But before we start, let me just switch to my camera. Turn the light on there, actually. Okay. So I was going to just say a little bit about the materials I use. So I've got my really big picture. I use quite a small book for drawing with pens, mainly because the bigger you're drawing, the longer it's going to take you to do. And there are so many strokes with ballpoint pens. I find if I go smaller than this, so this is, I don't know what this is, about 8 by 5, or A5 if you're British. If I go smaller than this, I find it really hard to get the lines light enough. So this is the size I like, which works best for me, but you can try different things. You can try different sizes. So this is, I thought I'd show you some of my my drawings in here, just a few. So this is kind of what we do. So I draw with pens. I only hatch vertically. You can hatch in as many directions as you like, but I find it easiest just to hatch vertically. I get in a bit of a mess, except sometimes in the hair. Occasionally in the hair, I'll hatch in a few other directions. So this is the most recent one I've done that I haven't posted yet, so you won't have seen that one. So that's just pens.
That beard's amazing. And
It glows a bit, doesn't it? I think
Yeah.
that's the pencils. I'm going to show you the pencils I use. So, but first of all, the reason I chose this picture is because a lot of the picture is quite dark, and the very light areas we can just leave the color of the paper while we're hatching. We might use some color pencil on them afterwards, but I find if a picture is very light, I find it quite hard to do with color pens, with ballpoint pens, sorry, because you're building up layers of pen, so it inevitably gets darker. So if I want a good picture, a photo that's easy to draw from, then I will usually go for something that's quite dark, like this one. It doesn't matter if there are some light areas, because we can leave those and not draw on them. But anything too pale, really hard to draw very fair-skinned, blonde people with ballpoint pens. So I tend not to try, because I've given up trying to get it to work. So this is much easier. So the pens I use, I like these Bic 4 colors. I've tried probably every brand that there is out there, but these are still my favorites. These come with other colored barrels. So if you go looking for the ones that have orange and yellow, and you can't find this yellow barrel, sometimes they have metallic barrels on them, different ones. It's still the same colors, and the same with this one. It'll sometimes have different, they release a new edition most years, but the colors on the pen are the same. So don't go buying every color barrel you see, because you're just buying this pen or this pen. You're buying one of these 4 basically. These are the 4 basic ones. So this one is pink and purple with yellow and orange. This one is pink and purple with blue and turquoise. These are both the same in that they're the basic black, red, blue, green, but there is a difference in the nib size. So these nibs are slightly fatter. So these are 1 millimeter nibs, and these ones are, I think, 0.7. Sorry, I can't convert that into inches. Got no idea. But I don't know what that is in inches. But this one's a bit fatter. So just like when we use fine liners of different sizes, I tend to draw with the red one, which is the finer one, and just use the blue one if there's a lot of area to cover. So I would probably use the blue one for the dark around her face, just because it's quicker, because the nib is fatter. These nibs again are both 1 millimeter, but this one is a bit thinner. And I've also got this pen, which is a CMYK pen, and I have this one for the yellow, because in the Bic pens, the yellow is really fluorescent, whereas this one is more of a normal yellow. It's more orangey, so it's a better yellow than that one. Most ballpoint pen yellows are fluorescent yellow. I guess it's just easier to produce that color But yellow, a genuine yellow like this one in the CMYK pen is like the gold standard of ballpoint pens. Wherever, if you start ballpoint pen drawing regularly, whenever you go in a pen shop, you'll be trying out the yellows to see if they're fluorescent or regular yellow. And the regular yellow is what you want. I use the fluorescent but the regular yellow, this is the only pen I found that's relatively easy to get hold of that has a decent yellow. I do also pick one of these up whenever I can, because just for the yellow, because this has a yellow in it too, which is somewhere between these two. It's a bit lighter than this one, but it's a the nib here is so fine. It takes you forever to produce any color with it because the nib is so fine. So the CMYK pen someone told me about in a class, and I just Googled it and found a seller. So it's CMYK as in, you know, the colors. I mean, I'll put that in the, let me just put that in the chat for you. When I can find the chat. Where's the chat gone? There it is. So it's called,
I've got that one. It's called,
it's great, isn't it?
UK in on the side of it.
Oh, it is. Yes, that's right. That's where I bought it from as well. Yeah, you're quite right. From Suck UK. I think that's just.com, isn't it? Oh, it's corrected my writing, but I think it's Suck UK.
Maybe it's a political statement.
So that's the pen anyway. And generally, I always have a gel pen as well in my ballpoint pens for the whites. It's so hard to preserve. So just for the whites of our eyes mainly. Sometimes there are other whites in a picture, but I always have a gel pen handy. And I used to do my underdrawing with pencil and erase it until I started using this, which is a non-photo blue pencil. So you can see that there on the screen. There are other brands. You don't have to use Caran d'Ache, but it's a very light blue and it doesn't show up in photos or scanning, photocopying, or in theory it doesn't. Occasionally I have seen it show up, but mostly it doesn't. So you don't need to erase it. If you do your initial drawing with this, I just leave it. I don't bother erasing it. So, but if you just Google non-photo blue pencil, you'll find various brands. This just happens to be the one that I've got. And then I wanted to talk about color pencils. So I use these for my ballpoint pen drawings, which are Japanese. They're made by Tombow. And you can get them in the UK. I saw these in a shop, very pretty Japanese shop, and was sort of, I have to have those. There are, so in this volume, there are 3 sets and there are 3 volumes. So there are 9 sets altogether. So I've got them all, but I mostly only use this set, which is volume 2. So if you wanted to buy some, so it says on there, oh, how can I show? Oh, there we are. Let me do it the right way up. Forgetting the camera. So it's volume 2. It just says volume 2 on the, so it's like a book. You slot them into the book and on the spine, it says volume 2. So in each set, there are 3 sets of colors. And the reason I like these ones, so there's a pale set. These pale sets are great for skin tone. That's what in the last picture you saw that it kind of shines. That's these pencils that do that. They're not heavily pigmented, but they're really easy to use. They're kind of quite creamy and they work really well. So and then there's also, so in that volume, there's also a deep set. They have a really nice indigo. They have really nice kind of reddy browns that you can use in the hair. So you don't really, I've got the other sets and I don't use them very much. I mostly use this one. The 3rd set is a grayish tone, which again, really nice for skin tones. I'm looking at the other sets. The other sets, one of them has, so there's one which is very pale tone again, dull tone and fluorescent. And then the other is the same as these, just different colors. So
are they waxy?
Yeah, they're very waxy. And they're just really nice to use. I was really glad I bought them at the time. I was a bit worried about how expensive they were, but I was really glad I bought them, and I'll replace them when they're used up. So that's everything about materials. So we're just going to draw. And the thing about ballpoint pens is I start with an underdrawing. In fact, I won't use the blue because I don't think you probably won't be able to see it. So I might have to use a pencil. But if you have a non-photo pencil, you can use it. I'm going to use just a regular pencil so that you can see it. There's no point me using a pencil you won't be able to see, is there? So I usually do just a simple underdrawing with pencil, and then I'll ink it initially with with the blue color on this bit, so the slightly finer nib, and then I just layer colors one on one, then another, until I'm at a point where I think I can get away with just color pencil on it. So when I've got enough ink down, so I used to do everything with ballpoint pen, but I just find that the portraits get really dark, so I'd rather use the pencils to fill in the spaces. So we're going to start by drawing Ida. So I'm just going to come in and start with her eyes in the middle of my page somewhere. If it helps to draw an oval and line through it like this and just see your eyes here, then do. I don't usually do it on my ballpoint pen ones, just because of the amount of erasing I then have to do. So we're just going to draw in her eye. And I never draw this small except when I'm using ballpoint pens. I would usually use a much bigger. I usually use like an A4, which is an 8x12 sketchbook, because I find it easier to draw bigger. But with ballpoint pens, you'd be going on forever before you finished your portrait. So I'm just drawing some of the main shapes with this, because we're going to draw our first layer with blue, and with blue I'll hatch in the shadows. You can actually draw the shadows if it helps in your first drawing. So I often include all the shadows because it just helps me, and I can see that. So when we're drawing the eyebrows, the easiest way to figure out where to put them is just to look at this distance here, which is about the same as her eyelid. So I knew when I first did that line that it was too high. It wasn't low enough. So I'm just going to draw it back in. As with all, if you've done other classes with me, with all portrait drawing, I'm always trying to just measure, just by looking at it, you know, where I'm looking at where that bit part of the eyebrow lines up, where the end of it sits, and I'm kind of looking at it relative to the other features. So, and the thing, if you get the eyebrow in the right place, the really useful thing is you can then start to draw the top of the nose, because it comes, as it does here, straight off the eyebrow. The space between the eyes, if someone has perfect features, then it's about the same as another eye. So it's not always the case, but they're usually about 1 eye apart. So I'm going to draw the second eye here. Try and get that round. This little part here is always the part of the eye I find the hardest to draw, because I always end up making it point when it really doesn't point. And then I'm going to draw in the lines under the eye, because that will help me with my hatching, so I know where to go. So then we want the eyelid, which you can't see very easily here because it's quite shaded, but we can draw it in anyway. And I'm gonna, so this shape here, I'm gonna draw that in because it helps me with the rest of my drawing, if I can get it right. And I'm gonna be hatching with the pen over it, so it will disappear. So then we have her nose. So to figure out how wide the nose is, just sit your pencil or whatever you're using and line it up with the eyes. It usually lines up more or less with the inside of the eye here. So, and hers does. So that tells you how wide the nose is. So I know that my nose comes to about here because I just measured it very simply. And then I'm just looking at the shape. and
I'm
part of
sorry,
her
what are
nose.
you I'm sorry, what are you measuring again for the nose?
So I'm just putting my pen there and
Okay.
seeing where the edge of her nose lines up, and it lines up right here with the
Okay.
inside of her eye.
All right.
And that's just a way of making sure you get it the right width. So you can just line it up there.
Okay, the width of
Yeah.
the width of the end of her nose, okay.
Yeah. And then for the shape, I mean, I'm just drawing in. I find in most photos, this part of the nose comes down lower than the I don't even know what these parts are called, but it comes down lower than the edges of the nose. So, I mean, you can draw that in again just to figure out how much further and how much lower it needs to be. I'm not sure mine is quite low enough. I'm going to draw in the shadow as well. So there's this really nice shadow under her nose, and I'll be hatching that. So it makes sense to draw it in. And if I draw it in, that will help me figure out where the mouth is. So I've drawn that in. And the mouth is basically just below that. So I'm just going to draw in the top lip there. And again, to figure out how wide the mouth is, just line up your pencil. It usually, if someone's looking straight forward, it usually lines up with the middle of their pupil. And in her case, it does. Sometimes it lines up with the edge of the iris. I think on that side, it might be the edge of the iris. On this side, it's nearer to the middle of her pupil. Maybe it is the edge of the iris. But you can, if you have a photo, you can just lay your pen on it and figure out where it sits. I know Ross Stendhal talks about drawing an invisible plumb line down, so just a straight line down. But you can do it just as easily by just putting a pencil on the page like that and figuring it out. So, and once I've done that, I'll look at my drawing and just kind of draw a line, draw that invisible plumb line that Ross talks about down, and just give myself some little marks so I know where the edge of the mouth is. Her mouth is really dark in the inside, which is going to be helpful for drawing with ballpoint pens. In a way, the darker the better. So I don't think that looks like, I think actually I've drawn her top lip too big, so I'm going to make it a bit smaller. And of course, this is just your initial sketch, so you can change everything when you come to hatching it. So now I've got the features down, I'm going to just figure out where the edge of her face is. And when I'm doing that, I'm looking really at this part here, how wide it is here and how wide it is here. And also, I guess, the chin. So as I'm drawing that line down, I'm just looking at my drawing and trying to figure out where. And also you have to figure out where kind of the chin starts. And again, you can just draw lines down. And there's the chin shape. So definitely, if you find it hard to visualize it, just draw on your photo. You might need then to print out another one because it's hard to see what's underneath the areas that you've drawn. But I strongly recommend drawing on your photo to figure out where things sit. So now I'm looking at her ears. So this photo is taken from slightly below her, I think, because normally the bottom of the ears lines up with the nose. And in this case, it doesn't. So it's much higher. It's sort of here, slightly below her eyes. So that tells you something about the angle that the photo's been taken at. So if we followed our normal rules of drawing ears where they should be, they would be totally wrong for this picture, which is why it's really important to look at what you're drawing from, rather than simply have read in a book that the bottom of the nose sits, the bottom of the ears sits level with the nose, because it would be wrong in this case. It's just about the angle that it's drawn with. So she has a bit of hair there. So I'm just going to do that to tell myself. What I really like about pictures like this, the hardest part of this is figuring out where how high her forehead needs to be, because I usually make them too low, too small. But again, you can just measure. So her forehead is about that long. So I'm just using my pen, and the forehead is about that long. And then I'm looking, and her eyes pretty much are in the middle of her face, which is where they should be. So we always think that eyes are much further up in the head, but they're not. They're more or less in the middle. So I know that the forehead should be as long as the distance from her eyes to her chin. So if I measure that out, so I'm just using my pencil and figuring out. So it's about that long from there. And then I can put this up here and I can give myself a mark. And I know that the forehead needs to be around there. So I would never have drawn it that big if I hadn't just measured it. So she looks very bald at the moment. She looks like a bald elf. But the whole of the background is going to be dark, so we don't need to draw in her hair. You can just about see it, actually. So maybe we can give her some, so she looks a bit more human. It's quite dark. Well, it's very dark. It's hard to distinguish from the background, but we can just about see it. So I'll put it somewhere like that. But I will draw that into the dark around the whole picture. So once I've got this far, I mean, I'm just looking, you can actually see she has a shirt kind of coming down there. Doesn't look like her at all right now. Don't worry about that. I now think that the forehead looks too high. So I'm looking at it again and measuring from the top of her eyebrows. Where did I start? So the top of her eyebrows is to there. So that is about the distance to her lip. So I'm just using a different way of measuring. No, it's definitely telling me it's right. Measuring says her forehead is that big, although it doesn't look right to me. But I've done it twice and it's told me both times that that's where it sits. So once I've got this far, I'm going to draw the outline and do some basic hatching. I'll hatch in the shadows. So I always use the blue, the regular blue on a blue, black, red, green. Always, never use a different color. That doesn't mean you can't. But for me, I define all the shadows with blue. So, and quite often these pens, I don't find they're very blobby, but I do find you have to scribble a little bit with them to get them going. So quite often I'll just do it here on the back. You can probably see. I didn't do it on that one, but I usually the backs of my, yeah, here. That's just me trying to get my pen working. They usually just need a little scribble to get them going. So I'll always do that before I start. And then I'm just going to draw again. Draw her. But I'm looking at my photo.
So you're using the blue of
I'm using the blue, yeah, the blue, the slightly smaller blue.
I don't think I have that smaller point, so I'm just
no, the other one will be fine.
Yeah.
So as I'm going, I'm still looking at my drawing and I'm correcting the bits where I think it's not quite right.
Are you doing a dark, firm line or a light line?
A reasonably firm one, actually. Yeah, I'm not too, because I know that there's going to be layers and layers of ballpoint pen going on top. So it doesn't matter too much. Once we start shading, I'll go much lighter. But at this point, I know that I'm going to be adding so much pen on top that I'm not really worried about how dark it is. In fact, I'm just going to define some of these shadows as well. So I'm just drawing lines in so I can see where the shadows go. Those I keep fairly light. So that line. And the thing about this is if you correct lines, because we're going to be doing so much work over the top, none of the lines you use at this point to correct things will show. you can really, I mean, I'm doing it over and over again. As I draw something and then I look and think, no, that line isn't quite right. I'll just change it because it won't, the corrections you make just won't show up. Or rather the errors you made.
Are you going over now at this stage all of the lines that you've drawn?
Yes, and I think I'm adding a few others as well. So I'm going over the main lines that I've drawn, but I'm also adding in some for the shadows where I didn't put them in with pencil. So I'm going over, I'm trying to do a fairly accurate drawing because this drawing is going to be the basis of all the hatching that I'm going to be doing. So where like here, I'm drawing the shadow under her nose and I'm kind of doing that as a solid line because I know I'm going to shade that anyway. It doesn't matter that I've drawn it in. So now I wasn't quite happy with how her lips looked before. So I'm going to have another go. So I'm just drawing in the dark part in the middle of her lips first. With the bottom. So I just realized that my bracelet is incredibly noisy. I'm going to take it off so you don't have to listen to it scraping along the desk. There, it's gone.
I can't hear it.
Can't you? Maybe the Zoom is removing those because it does remove background noise. It's probably removing it.
It's doing a good job.
It was annoying me. So, and then I'm just going to draw over the edge of her face. Again, if you get the edge of the face wrong and you want to correct it, just draw another line because that whole background is going to be shaded really dark. So if I show you one, so that was another one that I did with a really dark background. That's what we'll be doing here. So you don't really have to worry about the lines around the edge of her face because we'll be going over them. I mean, probably won't finish that today. If I've got a really dark background and I need to do a lot, then I'll do it in stages. Do a bit today, a bit tomorrow. So then I'm going to put in her ear. I'm just going to define the top of her forehead and put just a very vague line for her hair because I'm not. Actually, what I might do with her hair is just, so I'm just going to give some direction lines just to give the impression, which is the case, that her hair is tied back. It looks like it's back in a bun or something. So then it looks more like hair and it kind of makes sense. Whereas before it just looked like a line around her head. That's better. Yeah, so I'm happy with that now. So when I get to this point, I'll just look, see if I've missed some shadow lines, which I have. There's like a shadow on the tip of her nose too. So I'm just going to draw myself in a line for that. There's a very strong shadow under her mouth that I haven't drawn in. So I'm going to draw that in. There's also a shadow down the side of her face here. So I think that's most of the main shadows. So the reason I use a blue sketcher pencil, non-photo pencil, is I then don't have to do this erasing, but you wouldn't have been able to see what I was drawing. So I'm going to erase now. And I should just have a very simple line drawing underneath. The other thing that sometimes happens when you do this is that the ballpoint pen smudges, but it won't show up later. So don't worry if it does. My ballpoint pen often smudges. Yeah, that looks fine. So then you've got your base drawing. And once I've got this drawing, the first thing I do is with the same color, so that blue color that we started with, I'll use that to hatch in all the darks. So I usually start on the face. I'll go into her eye and just very lightly hatch across the iris. So at this point, I only do one layer. We will come back and do lots more layers, but right now I'm just going to start with a single layer. So I'm going to hatch in all these shadows around her eyes as well, but lightly. When you first start drawing with ballpoint pens, it's really hard to hatch lightly, but with practice, that's just something that I learned. You just have to practice. For this blue layer anyway, I'm not worried about going too lightly because I know this is going to be shadow. One way to get very light lines is to hold your pen sort of more horizontal, a bit like that. But right now I'm not that bothered about this because we're just doing shadows anyway. And I know they're gonna have to go a lot darker. So it's just vertical hatching the whole way. And the way to get it steady and even is I rest my hand on my book. So my hand is sat like that and my pen is going like this. And my hand is always resting on my book. It's not something I kind of do thoughtfully or intentionally. It's just the way I do it. And I've realized that that's what helps me to get good parallel lines. So occasionally I'll do these drawings in front of the TV rather than at a desk, and then it's much harder to get straight hatch lines because I don't usually have the book in front of me like this where I can just lean on it. The other thing that I find really useful, which I should have got out, I was looking to see if I could find it. Yes, here it is. So if I am hatching somewhere else and I'm not leaning on the hard desk, then it's quite useful to have one of these, which is, it's an acrylic, it's a clipboard. So I'll show you. So I will usually just I'll clip one end of my book to the clipboard. And then if I'm drawing on my knee or somewhere else, I've got a hard surface underneath it. So, I mean, you can get these for very little money, a few dollars or pounds in any stationery shop. So those clipboards are worth doing. Certainly if you're going to be doing a lot of drawing sort of in front of the TV or something, then I would recommend them because that's when I mostly use it. It just helps to have a hard surface underneath and to keep your hand steady so you've got something to lean on. So I'm looking at the shadows here around her eye, and I'm going to take them down just a little bit so that I kind of know where the darker part of her eye is. So the lines I'm drawing now are really to help me with drawing. So I'm just making sure that I know where the darkest shadows are. So I'm going to come do that so that we've got the tip of her nose. And sometimes I'll forget or I won't notice a shadow and I'll come across it later while I'm drawing. That's fine, just fill it in later. But it helps if you can have them all from the beginning. So I'm going to hatch the shadow under her nose. I'm going to hatch the middle of her mouth, I think, where it's very dark. It's quite hard to do really short hatch lines. So this kind of hatching in her mouth isn't that easy. So, and then I'm going to go under her mouth. We will add shadows to the other features later, so to her lips and things like that. But it's beginning to look more like her because we're adding in some volume. I always find once you make a drawing look a bit more 3D, then you get more of a likeness. So, and other than this, I'm going to hatch just the top of her ears and then around her hair. So I'm just going to do that so I know it's there, but I know it's dark. So just my hatch lines here aren't that long. They're just about the width of her hair. So what I would usually do at this point, and maybe I will do just very quickly, because her hair merges into the background, I'll usually do a layer of hatching right around. I'm only going to do one. I won't build up all the layers because it would take up the whole class time. But I'll just start over here and then just build up hatch lines behind her, because I know I want that background to be really dark. Because I use color pencils as well now, it's much quicker to get it really dark. So I can just use a dark indigo color pencil. I'm going to move this pen there in my way. So now, because I'm drawing on this side of the page, my hand is resting on the desk rather than on the book. But that's what keeps everything steady. So, and I'll just keep going. These ones for the background, they don't have to be that neat, because you're going to be going, yeah, you're going to be adding layers and layers. So don't worry if you can't keep them neat. But if you hold your pen at a sort of, not like that, but at a kind of 45-degree angle, it's much easier to draw lightly. And I would rather have lots of light layers than really heavy lines. But it is a practice thing. I remember the first ballpoint pen class I took. And I'm trying to remember the guy's name, Robin something, can't remember. If anyone remembers, let me know. I did a really great class with him, but his pen strokes were almost invisible, and I couldn't imagine ever being able to draw like that. And I still can't do them as well as he can, but they're not bad. I can go fairly light. I wish I could go as light as he did. My pen isn't working. So sometimes your pen will just dry up a bit. And then what happens is when you restart, so you have to stop and scribble to get it to work. And then when you restart, you end up with some darker lines, which is what I've got there. Don't worry about it. So I'm going to carry on with the hatching and do it below her face as well, because I know I want the whole thing to be dark. So I know I want dark underneath too. This is why you tend to draw small, because if you did if you did a larger one, it would take you hours to do these lines. I mean, it takes hours anyway, but it would take even more hours. So I'm going to come back up here and just finish off. So I really like doing this kind of hatching, and I would quite happily, my pen's getting blobby. Fortunately in the background, not on the face. But yeah, I'll quite happily sit and just hatch away at the background for an hour. You know, I'd be listening to music or to a podcast or something, but I'll just hatch away. And I don't find it remotely boring. But we're not going to spend the whole class doing that. So that would be my first layer of background. And then I'll just carry on. And I do use the black here, but for darks, like in the background here, the only thing I really use the black for, I use it in the eyes and for eyelashes. I try not to use it otherwise, because the dark in the background here, if you use all the other colors you've got, you'll get a really rich, nice looking dark. Whereas black looks very flat. So I'll use all the colors. So that layer I've just done on the background, every color that I use, I'll then carry on and use it in the background. So the background ends up being made up of all the colors that I'm using, but it will come out black or very dark. I mean, not black, a dark purpley black. So now I have done a first blue layer on the face. Sometimes when I get to this point, I really like it, so I don't bother with other colors. I'll just carry on with blue. So if you have got blue and that's all you've got and you want to carry on with it, then do. I will often just stick with blue because I like the way it looks. And quite often the other thing I'll do is take a photo of it at this point, so that if I end up not liking the final version, I've got an earlier blue version. I've got a picture, a photo of it. So yeah, definitely take photos as you go, so that you can have a look at them later and decide what colors you like using, because you might like to use different colors from me. It's worth keeping keeping hold of pictures. So once I've done the blue, I'll usually use the orange. I use the orange as the main skin tone. So I'll look at my picture, figure out where the skin tone is, and the really white areas here, I can draw a circle around them. It will help me spot them. Those I'll usually leave white, though I might add some color to them when I'm using pencils.
If you don't have orange, what would you suggest?
You can use pink or yellow.
Okay.
Or red sometimes, yeah. Red will work
Pink,
too.
Pink
Yeah.
I've got.
Yeah. There's a guy, I'm going to write his name in the chat. There's a guy called Nicholas Sanchez, who is my, if I was going to say, if I carried on doing ballpoint pens till the day I die, I'd want to do one that looked the way he draws. So he uses ballpoint pens. He does them very small. He's on Instagram, but I can't remember his Instagram handle. But you can Google him. He's got a website as well. That's a website. He's quite famous now. He does the most incredible ballpoint pen drawings. And he does them in a really small sketchbook, so a tiny sketchbook. I went to a webinar that he was in a couple of months ago, and he was saying he started doing those because he had to commute every day to art school, and so he drew them on the way home on the train, and they're incredible. And he just uses the 4 colors. He uses blue, black, red, green, and he gets the most incredible skin tones, and I don't know how he does it, because I can't get the ones that he's got. But it's really worth going and looking at some of his work. It's beautiful, really beautiful.
So now you're just going over.
I'm using orange, and I'm going around it.
The whole face?
The whole face, except the areas where I've kind of drawn in these lines, because those I'm just going to leave
where it's really light.
Yeah,
okay.
Where it's really light. So, and again, I'm always amazed when I see people like France who start in one area and do that area and then move on. I don't. I always work on the whole face at the same time, because I'm just not convinced that I could get my strokes even on different sides of the face if I drew them at different times. So, and you probably can't even see what I'm doing. So I'm doing it really, really lightly at the moment. So again, I've got my pen at that angle. The more horizontal you get the pen, the lighter your strokes will be, in my experience. So I'm just doing very, very light strokes right now, but across the whole face, yeah. And you can layer this up. You know, I'll probably do, excuse me, 5 or 6 layers of orange. But initially, I just use each color once.
Are you going over the areas that you shadowed in with the blue also right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can go over everything. You can do the mouth as well. So when I get down there, I'll do the mouth. And I tend to work left to right.
Are you leaving, excuse me, are you leaving highlight circles on her forehead?
Yeah. I haven't drawn in the highlight circles, but I'm leaving them. Yeah. You could draw them in with pencil. If it would help, you can draw them in now with pencil, work around them, and then erase them if you can still see them at the end. So if that will help. I do sometimes, if it's a really complicated highlight, then I will draw it in and work around it. Sometimes I have to do that with the nose. In fact, I might do that on the nose, because otherwise I just find myself forgetting and going over it. But even if you forget on your first layer of orange or whatever color you're using, you're going to put so many layers on top that if you don't add any more layers, it will still be light.
And you're going over the lips too?
Yeah. I haven't got that far yet, but I will. I've just seen another highlight here. So I might leave that. There's less of one on this side, but I might leave the one on this side. In fact, I might just, again, lightly draw that one in. So definitely draw them in if it helps. Sometimes just having them draw in helps you to stop, because you can just get into this just hatching across the page over and over. And if you have them very lightly drawn in, you'll come to that line and realize that you really didn't want to hatch there. And also sometimes I see my strokes getting darker and I realize that it's because I've moved the pen and it's more upright. I know I have to hold it down here to get a really light stroke. So if you notice your lines getting darker, just look at how you're holding your pen, because in my case, that's usually why. So I don't know if you, oh, you can see some of it on the, I was worried you couldn't see any of it on the screen. You can see a little. But also don't worry too much, because we can, if we end up drawing over the highlighted areas and didn't mean to, we can correct a lot of it again with color pencils at the end. So once I've done the whole face, which I just have, I would then do the background. So I'll just go start at the top and just do a whole layer. I'm not going to do it now because I don't want to take up the whole class drawing of background, but I will do it later. And in this portrait, I won't draw the hair separate to the background, because if I do, it will look separate, and I want it to look like it's merged into the background. So I'll just do whole layers. So the strokes I'm doing now, just do the top row, is coming right down to her forehead of the orange. And I'll do the whole background with that. But I will have to do that later or tomorrow, rather than waste class time doing it. So once I've done a bit of yellow, a bit of orange, sorry, I will move on to pink. And again, I have to scribble to get it going. So this is just the order I do them in. You don't have to. And it's just about layering the colors over each other to try and get the impression you want. And when I'm doing these strokes, I'm not worried either about hitting the edge of her forehead. I'll just go over.
So I know what color? What color are you at now?
This is pink.
I've already done pink. What about a baby blue? A baby blue?
You can use blue. You could use red. It's about looking at the photo and figuring where you want those colors. So I'm looking at where the orange is almost pink, and it certainly is around the sides of her face. So I'm just adding it around there. And then, so whatever color you're using, it's kind of about looking for that in the background and figuring where it's needed. But also I will use all of the colors in this dark background as well. So you can also work on that. So there's quite a lot of pink around her eyes. So, and my lines are getting heavy again. So I'm adjusting my pen. So there's some nice pink here across the bridge of her nose. There's a little bit above her eyebrows. So I'm going into her eyebrows with pink as well. I think she has pink eyeshadow on. It certainly looks like it. There's also some pink in her eyeball here. So here, this area is pink, this area is pink, this area is too, but less so. So I'll use the pink in there as well. And then I'm looking at the area underneath her eye, where again, there's a lot of pink. So I'm just going to add that in. Slightly down the bridge of her nose. Same in the other eye. I'm going to look at what's underneath her eye, which is very pink, those shadows. Oh, I don't think my pen is, no, my pen is not working then. That's better. Her ears. Then there's almost always pink on the end of the nose, and there is some here. So I'm just going to add some pink there. And the shadow under her nose is very pink. So I'm going to add pink to that shadow. Then I'm looking at the side of her face, at her cheeks. There is definitely some pink in here. And my lines are really scruffy there. But I'm not going to worry very much. So I'm going to go over her lips with pink. And the shadow underneath. And then just around the edge of her chin. The reason for starting very lightly is that obviously if you kind of add too much of one color, it doesn't look right. The lighter you are, the easier it is to adjust it with later layers. You can always add more, you can't take it away. So the lighter you go, the better. So I've done my pink on the face, or my first layer of pink on the face. Normally, as I said, I would add it to the background as well, but I'm not going to do that right now. So I'm going to carry on with her face. So I'm going to use the light blue now. And there's obviously blue in her eyes. There isn't very much anywhere else. So I would probably just use this in her eyes and in the background. So I might decide later that I want more of this in her face. Because you can use it to correct. If you make her face too pink, we can go in with some blue and correct it. But right now, I'm just going to do it there. And I would be adding it to the background. So that's another layer that needs to go into the background.
What about under her lips? With that light blue?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, because it is a very dark shadow. Yeah, maybe I will. Thank you for that suggestion, Sharon. I'm going to add it in.
I think I'm going to do her eyebrows too, because they're pretty dark.
Yeah, anywhere where there's dark, I would tend to use all the colors to try and get a really, really good, rich black. So I'll usually use all of them. But if you forget to do something now and come back to it later, I might use the light blue in these shadows around her eyes as well.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah, you can always come back and add. Yeah, that really helps actually. It makes that shadow much more interesting. Just on the tip of her nose. I think I'm going to add some yellow now. So you can use the fluorescent yellow. So if you've got one of these pens and the only yellow you've got is the fluorescent, then that's fine. If I go out with my sketchbook, I just take like 3 of these pens and I'll use that yellow because that's the yellow I've got. But because I have this other yellow, I'm going to use this one. So, I mean, I might come in with some fluorescent yellow as well to brighten up the edges of the highlights. But right now I'm using the yellow that I've got on my CMYK pen.
And you're using that just on the highlights right now?
No, I'm going to use that over all the areas of her face that look yellow. So around this part of the forehead, around quite a lot of the cheeks. Yeah. I use yellow a lot, just like I do when I'm Copic drawing. I like what it does, but obviously I'm going into the edges of the highlights. So to make them a bit more visible, but also to brighten them. Because I want them brightened up. I mean, I think it's really helpful when you've finished a layer to just stop and look at what you've done and see if there are other areas where you might want to add more of that color. I tend to, when I'm doing these kinds of drawings, these ballpoint pen drawings, I usually do them over several days. So I don't usually do them all in one sitting, mainly because I find that if I work on it for a couple of hours and then I stop and I go away and I come back to it the next day, I have a much better sense of what I need to do to it and where it needs other colors, just because I've been away from it for a bit and come back to it. So I really recommend not trying to finish it in a day, which when I first started out, that's what I was always trying to do. Like, I've got to finish it today.
It's very meditative. It'd be hard not to.
Yeah, it's really meditative.
Especially this vertical hatching.
Yeah, it's a really nice process, and you can kind of just get into a zone and that's when I really like doing the background, because when I did the whole point of the initial pencil drawing, pen drawing in blue and marking out the shadows, is that really after that you don't have very much thinking to do. You're just kind of looking and adding color, because you've told yourself with those lines, you've kind of marked out where the color needs to go, and then it's just hatching. And it's very relaxing. I can do this with a migraine, and it's about the only kind of drawing that I can easily do with a migraine, and it will help. I'll forget I've got one until I'm finished. It's just a very, very relaxing thing to do. But yeah, definitely go away, leave it, come back to it the next day, have another look. So she's got a layer of yellow on her now. I would again add a layer of yellow to the background. So just keep going in the background. But I'm not going to do just the speed, or to be sensible, because we don't really have the time. So yeah, we've been going for an hour. How have we been going for an hour? Okay. So with the red, I then maybe switch to red. I mean, I try and use all the colors basically. So, but only if I can see that there's a place for them. Obviously, I don't really see a place for the green in this one very much. I usually do use this very light green. This light green is really nice. And very often you can see a lot of green in shadows. But in this portrait, there isn't very much, so I'm just not going to use it. But the red, I'll come in again, I'll add a little bit around the eyes. Sometimes when I come in with the red, I'll kind of draw over some of my lines as well to make them look. So like the lines around the eyes, I'll just draw over those lines very lightly to make them look a bit more pink. And again, with the red, I'll just lightly hatch. Usually in most of the places where I've got pink. And I'll do a first layer on the lips too. Quite often the edges of shadows are red as well. So it's quite nice to just go in the edges.
Have you found or have you noticed that when you do the background, does it matter the order in which you use the pens, the colors?
Yeah,
I mean,
it doesn't matter at all. I don't think it matters anyway.
Okay.
So long as you use colors that you think fit.
Okay.
I haven't noticed that it really matters.
Okay.
I sometimes notice that I need another layer of a color. So I find that often that the blue gets very light because I've done layers and layers of other colors on top of it. So I quite often find I'll realize that I need to go in and put in more blue to bring the shadows back out. So, but I don't think it's really about the order. It's just about noticing if you need to add.
Well, I'm just wondering how this yellow is going to show up on the background.
Yeah, it probably won't, because you can go over it with more and more layers of darks. So if it does show up and you decide it's too light, you can just go over it with more and more layers of dark. So I'll just carry on with layers until I've got something that I like. But what I'm going to do in a moment, well, maybe I'll do about another 10 minutes, and then I'll show you how I use the pencil to kind of even out. Obviously mine isn't nowhere near finished because it needs all the background doing as well, but I'll show you how I do it, just so that you can see the whole process. So I haven't used the green, and I might use the green, just the regular green, so this darker green. I might use it just slightly in her eyes, and I would use that in the background to add to the black, to create more of a black. At the moment, I think I'm going to use it in her eyes a little bit. Yeah, that's really nice. I'm probably not going to use it anywhere else, except that I would use it to darken up. So I'm going to put some on her eyebrows to darken up the darks, basically. So I will add this to the background later. And then I haven't used purple. So I use purple a lot as well in my backgrounds. So if when I finished doing a layer of each color in the background, it's not dark enough, I'll often add some more purple because it's probably the closest to black of these colors. So other than the black, I will usually do a little bit of black. I'll do some black in a moment, but purple is really nice at darkening up the areas that you want dark and shaded. So don't feel you have to use every color you've got. I do have somewhere, I have a brown ballpoint, but I never use it because I would much rather create interesting hair colors with these colors that I've got. So if I wanted to do brown hair, I'll use a mix of the orange, red, purple. Just keep going until I get sort of a color I like. So, but at the moment, I'm just darkening some of these shadows with the purple. Purple can be quite good for the edges of the mouth as well. So on the red, to darken up the red.
Have you done her iris?
Not yet.
Okay. I've got you up on half and her up on half, so I'm trying to watch. I'm trying to watch. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to remember to say exactly what I'm doing as I'm doing it, but I sometimes forget. So I'm adding a bit of purple to her lips right now, to the darker areas. So if I use the black, I will use the black to do. Sometimes if I can't get the background dark enough, I'll use a layer of black along with the other layers, but I'll put other colors on top of it so it doesn't look like a solid black. What I'll use the black for, I probably won't do her iris with this black because I'll probably do it with a pencil. But the black, I will always draw in the eyelashes. So I'm going over the line, the eyelid edge on the top of her eyes, and then drawing in the eyelashes.
And you're doing that with black?
I'm doing that with black, yeah.
Okay.
Again, I'm not finished, so I might put other layers on top of it, and this might disappear because it quite often does. As you add more layers, you then lose it again, but you just go back and draw it in again. So I'm giving her some eyelashes now. Yeah, maybe I will do the iris. I sometimes do it with pencil and sometimes do it with pen. I could do it with both. So we'll just add in a little bit of an iris, lightly. And then, yeah, I would probably do a layer of black on this background because it needs to be so dark. But again, I'm not going to do it now. I'm just going to outline her nostrils as well because I want them to be a bit darker. So anywhere where you feel like it's not quite dark enough yet, but you want to get there, you can add some black. So I'm going to add a little bit of black in the middle of her mouth. And then I would do the background with it, but because of time, I'm not going to. So I'm going to move on to color pencils. I'm not finished with this. So normally I would carry on and do probably 2 layers of each color on the face and in the back, on the face where that color is appropriate, and then on the whole background. And so then when I've got something that is looking more finished than this, I'll add some color pencils. So I usually have just open these up. Yeah, so there's a really nice, I've got a really nice peach one here. And you can tell by how worn down the nib is that I use this one a lot. This is the one I often use for the skin tone. So I'll just go over very gently. So I'm adding color, but this is a really light color. So you can always add more if it's not enough. So I'll add that basically over everywhere where I've colored orange. So it really helps if you have some either pastels or very light colored color pencils. Well, sometimes even some of the cheaper ones that don't have much pigment in and you have to work quite hard to get the color out of them would work really well for something like this. So I'm not being particularly careful. I'm just going over everywhere where I think this skin tone. I'll be a bit more careful around the eyes because I think that underneath this eyelid here is quite lightly pink rather than this color. And this, when you get to an almost finished point, the pencils can be really helpful in making your background really dark. So I've got an indigo one and I'll just use the indigo over the whole background. So the pen lines still show up because these pencils just work so well with it. But yeah, the pen lines will still show up. You're basically adding color to the spaces between the hatches when you're doing this. So I'll usually use a yellow on the skin just around the highlights. So maybe moving into the highlights a little bit with the yellow so that the edges of them are quite yellow, because that really helps them to stand out. But obviously for me, my darks are nowhere near dark enough yet. So in a way, the most useful colors are going to be the dark ones. So if I find my indigo, it's quite helpful for the lips as well, because I find it quite hard to get the lips to be a color I need. So this one, look. So this is a kind of a dark pink. I'm just going to test it first. Yeah, that would be really nice for the lips. So I've got this dark pink. I'm just going to use it. It's sort of a pinky purple color. I mean, what I will do with this is take this away and add more ballpoint to it. Yeah, but this helps to fill the gaps. And I also usually use red just around the edges. I mean, maybe I'll use something a bit more reddy. I'm sure I have one. So I'll use this just around the edges of the shadows, because very often the edges of the shadows are really red. And if you do something with your pencils and you don't like it, as I don't like that bit of color I've done there, you can always just remove it with an eraser. So I'm going to go in and add the shadows just to show you what a difference that will make. So this is my favorite of the colors, the indigo, and it will just make everything darker. So I'll just go into all the shadows and just darken them up. And as my pen lines disappear, I can put some of them back in with the pencil. Where I want it to be a bit lighter, I just put it on its side, same as I did with the pen. And when I'm using pencils like this, I'll mostly shade with them, but sometimes I'll hatch with them like I do with my other drawings, if I don't want the color to be really thick. So here I've hatched a little bit. Darken up the lips too, and the shadow under the lips. And then what I would do with this is do the whole of the background like this. So on top of all the layers of pen that I would not usually have done, if I want a dark background, I'll then just go over it with indigo. Quick if you put the pencil on its side, because you're using the whole of the nib to draw with. But having to be a bit more careful at the edges, obviously. So, but she needs some shadow on her edges. So, and if you go up, towards the hair. Once I'm using a pencil, I won't distinguish between the hair and the background. I'm just going to use both. And if by the time I finished it's still not dark enough, I can go in with more layers of ballpoint pen and with more layers of pencil color. So I could use a different color pencil to get it really dark. So if I went on top of the blue with a red, I'd get a kind of dark purple, which would be a really nice background color. So oops, that was definitely a line I didn't want, but it doesn't matter. But you see what darkening the background does? It makes the whole face stand out so much more. And obviously, in my case, it's a bit untidy because I'm trying to do it quickly to show you. But you can be much more careful. And I'll put layers on top of this so it won't look so untidy when I'm finished. Just trying to work quickly. So the other thing I'll do with a pencil is in the portrait up here, there are hairs up here, so you can add those. You can just draw those in with a pencil. So because usually for me the pencil stage will be my finishing stage. So obviously that's not what I'm doing today, but so I would add in. So I'm going to go over her lips because they're not the right color. They need to be much redder. I might have to use pen again. So once you've added in color, you can see where you need to, actually I will do her eyes. You can see where you need to add more color because the color's not right. So I'm going to add that to her eyes. And if I'm drawing the iris in with a pencil, I won't usually use black, I'll use the blue. Again, just because black tends to be really flat. And I'll draw that shadow across her eye with the indigo as well. And then I'm going to add some pink because the pink areas have lost a lot of their pinkness. So we'll go back over those with some pink. I've just realized that I didn't use the blue on this shadow on her cheek. So I'll come back in a moment with some blue and strengthen that shadow. But it's always nice to add pink around the eyes as well. And you can do this in stages. So you can add pencil and then have a look and decide you need to go back with more pen. So you can hopefully see that her eyelashes have almost disappeared again. And that's what will happen as you add more and more layers. The darks will disappear under the layers. So you need to add them back in, basically. Just keep adding them back in. And I'll always do the highlights on her eyes. I'm not going to do it because it's not finished yet. But yeah, I was going to add some blue to her cheek here. So I will sometimes, because the edges can get a bit scrappy, you can either just knock them back a little bit with an eraser, or you can use a pencil blender. And I'm looking and I can't see mine. Is that what that is? No, I can't see it right now, so I won't use it, but you can use it if you want to blend the colors in a little bit better than I've done here. So at this point, I'm just going to come in and add some more dark. So I might go back to the original blue, actually. So I'll use the original blue to darken up her face. It's watching time, yeah. 5 more minutes, and then we can share what we've done. And as soon as I add another layer of blue, that immediately looks much darker. So this is why I think the blue is kind of the key color, because the more you add it, the more defined your shadows become. And I would use this as well around the background, but I'll show you what I do with the bigger pen. So all those pinks I just put in have been knocked back a bit by the blue. So if you put them in and they're too strong, just do a layer of blue over the top and they will disappear. They're still there. They're still helping add the color to your portrait, but then just not so obvious. So this one is the slightly bigger nib. So for the background, I will use the slightly bigger nib. And that's really the only reason I have this one. It's so that if I've got areas with a lot of color to fill, I can use the fatter nib and it will fill the areas quicker. The others are this size nib anyway, the kind of pastel colors. But, so I'll just keep going. And I'm going right over her hair. I'm not separating the lines I'm doing from her hair, from the background, because I want it all to be really dark. And once you've got the background on, once you've done the color pencil in the background, the ballpoint pen, although it's there, you can't see the separate lines. So the color pencil is a great disguise for slightly scruffy hatching. It's getting very scruffy now because I'm trying to work quickly. But yeah, color pencil will cover most sins. And obviously, if you have, you might have a really nice set of lots of color pencils. You can use lots of colors. I've just used a few here, but you could use many more. I mean, I have to do a lot more work on my background to make it quite dark before I can decide if the face is finished or not. At the moment, I'm not sure. But until I have, and the other thing you can do, if you want to fill in the background quicker, you can cross hatch. It takes longer to fill in a background if you're vertical hatching, because you're having to, you're hoping that your pen will fill in those spaces, and it doesn't always. But if you cross hatch, it'll fill in much quicker. So I'm really bad at cross hatching. It just becomes really untidy, and that's
just turn your paper the other way and vertical hatch.
Yeah, I guess so. It's not about the actual hatching. It's more that it always ends up looking really messy when I do it. I can't quite figure out, how to get it to grade in the way that it does. And I find it much easier to do when I'm just going in one direction. I just end up with really messy crosses. And that was why I started doing it like this. And since I've carried on doing it like this, I've kind of developed a way of doing that I'm happy with. So she looks bald at the moment. Looking at mine, it does look bald. But once the background is all dark, it will make sense. It just doesn't make sense at the moment because it's not finished. So yes, looking at it now, I will probably go back to her hair and add some of these lines that make it obvious that she's got hair. Yeah, that immediately looks better. I think it's because her hair is totally pulled back, so there's no hair on her face.
Yeah.
Because normally I would just merge them and not worry about it and it would look fine, but I think it's because there's no hair on her face, so she looks very bald. But you can just, there we are, very simply, just a few strokes and she's got hair again. And the other thing you could do is add a different color just on top. So let's try that. So we could just add, so there's a purple here, maybe I'll use that. You could just add a different color. So, you know, it might be brown, but just separate her hair very slightly from the background. Make it a slightly different tone. I like to use purple for black hair, very dark hair.
I wish my pink pen hadn't blobbed on me, so.
So many of my drawings have big blobs in the middle of them. It's part of ballpoint pen drawing.
Yeah.
And some people I've seen, just when they do it, they're constantly wiping the nib of their pen. I don't do that because I don't really find it that necessary. So I might do it once or twice when I'm doing a whole drawing. But you can do that. You can just keep wiping your nib. Certainly some of the other pens that I've bought, some of the other 4 colors are really blobby. And you do have to wipe them the whole time. There we are. So now her hair has a slightly different color and she doesn't look bald anymore. And again, we can bring that forward.
I'm going to try my black grape Prismacolor on it.
Oh, nice.
I like
And
that.
you can just add a few flyaway hairs and then she has hair. So there are things you can do. So I'm just looking, we have just a few minutes left. So the other thing that I think probably definitely needs more work is her lips, which at the moment don't look right. So, but if you know me in mouths, we don't get along. So, but I'm just going to add more red. Yeah, looking better with a bit more color. So the little highlights on her mouth, I'll probably do. I don't know. I might do with a gel pen. I might try with a pencil and see what happens. Just try different things until I get something that I'm happy with. Also, just trying to separate the bottom of her nose from the shadow. So maybe I'll put a little bit of red in the shadow to make it a different color. There we are, that's better, from the bottom of her nose. And I'm going to put red in these shadows up here. And I've just realized I'm using the fatter red, which I didn't intend to, but it's fine. I'm not sure it's working very well anyway. So
Have you ever done this style of portrait in Procreate?
Yes. Yeah. I've got the pen. There's a pen in Procreate, the ball pointy pen, which is great. That's a pen. I think it comes with there's a pack called George's Pack, which has the Blackwing pencil. It also has the ball pointy. And
I'll have to look because I got it and I've got the Blackwing.
Well, it'll be there. Find the ball pointy in amongst the thousands of pens. It was France actually who recommended that. And I've bought ballpoint pens and they're nowhere near as good as the ball pointy. The ball pointy is the best one. So don't buy any others.
I'll have to look because I don't remember that.
Yeah, it's in that pack and it's fabulous. Really, really nice pen. So you can do it with that, but I have a set of really nice color pencil ones as well that I can use in the background. But yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I would do it in Procreate is because it's much easier to draw on an iPad in front of the TV. So when I'm using Procreate, that's what I'm doing. I'm usually, yeah, I don't usually use Procreate sitting at my desk. Procreate I'll use absolutely anywhere. Most of the drawing I do sat at the desk here. But yeah, Procreate I can do anywhere, and that's why I love the iPad. So I think that's as finished as it's going to get at the moment, because I need to be adding more layers of other colours. And we're at almost past. So I think I'm going to stop there. Yeah, thank you. It was fun. And I have lots of blobs here. You might not be able to see them very well, but there's one there, there's one there, there's one here, there's one on her nose. But in the overall mix of the picture, you don't really notice them. You can see them if you look for them, but that's what ballpoint pens do. So don't worry. Maybe I'll just do, before we finish, there I might have to redo these. So I'm just using my gel pen to add highlights to her eyes, bring her to life a little bit.
Now,
I didn't think about that. Let me get my gel pen out.
Yeah, use your gel pen. These are what we use for the highlights. I use them with everything. And yeah, I love that. So I will see you next week. Maybe we'll do another ballpoint pen next week.
cool.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Great class.
So we'll have another go next week. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.